Broadcasting from an undisclosed location, which may or may not be a bedroom converted into a recording studio. I'm Rex Overdrive, back with another edition of Abominations in Technicolor. This show is brought to you by the fine folks over at Audible. Head on over to audibletrial.com/abominations and sign up for a free 30-day trial membership. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Get a free audiobook on us once again at audibletrial.com/abominations. Now joining me as always is Adam. How's it going, Adam?
Hey, how's it going? Hopefully everybody's excited to be traveling back to 1999 this week. I know I am. I've been looking forward to living La Vida Loca again. How about you, Rex?
I'm ready to party like it's 1999. You know, Fred Durst style. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I think you've had that genie in the bottle this last week. You're ready to get that thing out, aren't you?
Genie in a bottle? What are you talking about?
Songs of 1999.
Oh, that's right. Oh, it was a fine year of, some great singles on the charts.
Get that Mambo number 5 going this week.
Was that also 99? I feel like that have been a little bit earlier. Even Livin' La Vida Loca, I feel like that was earlier. It was only 99?
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on, a little bit later, we'll be diving into Brendan Fraser's Mummy movie from 1999. And then in a little bit more recent news, a little bit current news, I wanted to talk about something that, if you've been following comic book movies or just like the DC movies, anything like that, you know, most of us are fans of comic book movies. It's easily the most popular genre or franchises in movies today. But it was announced that officially Ben Affleck is no longer going to be Batman. He's stepping away. I mean, there's been reports the last couple of years about this guy stepping away, and then he's back. He's going to be Batman. Is he not, or is he? But it's official. He passed the torch. And he's looking forward to Matt Reeves' vision for the Batman, which Warner Brothers officially dated for June 25th, 2021. It's going to be a good birthday present to you, Adam.
Yes.
We don't have any sort of announcement of who's going to be playing Bruce Wayne and Batman, but I'm sure we'll find out in the next coming months. But what are you sort of takeaway from this? Does it bother you that this is going to kind of screw up like the current DC continuity, or would you rather just see a good sort of iteration of Batman on its own and not necessarily like being tied into like these other DC characters?
Yeah, I think like if the intention is for it to be a standalone movie, I don't think that one particular movie will suffer. I think they could still make a great movie.
Yeah.
But I think the overall DC, DC movies as a whole, as a complete package, in the way that we kind of look at the MCU, this DC universe will suffer from this. I feel like the continuities that's still important, and whenever there's recasting going on, like it just, that little bit of taking you out of the movie, or either when you're watching it or even prior to this, could really impact the anticipation of the movie. It might lose interest, thinking like, I don't know if I'm gonna be as excited to see it anymore. So it's just, it's way too early to tell for sure. But, I think at the point where I kind of saw what Ben Affleck could do as Batman, I thought he did a pretty decent enough job with it that I'd like to see him continue on and do the Batman and at least see him through that one. But we'll see. I mean, maybe they'll turn out something better than we thought, than we think we were going to get, and surprise us. Who knows?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Matt Reeves, and I guess really the only couple of films I've seen of his. I mean, he directed Cloverfield back in the day for J.J. Abrams, who produced that with his Bad Robot Company, but the last two Planet of the Apes movies are just ridiculously good. Like those are phenomenal. And War of the Planet of the Apes was like Planet of the Apes meets The Shawshank Redemption or something like that. I was blown away by that, and just how that guy could bring these CGI motion capture characters to life. Obviously you have a performance by like Andy Serkis, but it was just such a well-crafted film. And you know, even some of the action in that opening scene where those like soldiers are attacking this bunker with all these apes in it, and I was just blown away by War for the Planet of the Apes, and I cannot wait to see him sort of do this more like detective driven Batman.
Yeah, like a noir.
Yeah,
crime noir kind of film. Yeah,
and we've seen snippets of that throughout the Nolan trilogy, and even a little bit of that in like Batman v Superman. But there's never been like a full on noir detective Batman movie where he's like throughout the entire movie he's trying to like hunt down this villain or character, and you know, use all of his gadgets to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to see.
I'm excited to see that.
I'd like to see the the criminal underground kind of have a Dick Tracy kind of feel to it.
Oh yeah, Dick Tracy's a great movie, and I can definitely see that flavor.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of has that more comic book signature to it, you know, just really connect the comic book to the film, as opposed to Nolan's being just a little bit more realistic, you know.
Yeah, definitely. But also in the DC world, it's been announced that James Gunn is going to be directing the sequel. I guess it's going to be sort of like a retooling or a little bit of a reboot. Not necessarily, I don't want to use the word reboot because it's still sort of has the possibility of utilizing some characters that were in the first one that came out just a couple of years ago. Probably going to be Viola Davis, who was she's a good actress, man.
All right.
What was the movie she did with what's his name? I can't think of it. I'm blanking on the most popular African American actor of the last 15, 20 years.
Morgan Freeman?
No. He wins all the Oscars.
Mahershala?
No. Remember the Titans?
10 Years a Slave?
No, Remember the Titans, the football movie. Who's the coach?
Oh, Denzel, man.
Denzel
You're
Washington.
talking about Fences?
Yeah, Viola Davis was in Fences.
Yeah,
she's a great actress. She plays.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just saying that of all the people in Suicide Squad, you're talking about Viola Davis.
Well, I'm just saying that she's probably going to be the character that returns, because she's sort of like the head of this branch that brings in these DC characters that are in prison, and they utilize them for these certain missions. So you could keep her as the core, and then you could bring in all these different sort of, sort of members for the Suicide Squad. So they could do something like Killer Shark or King Shark, I think. Instead of like Killer Croc, you have like King Shark.
Killer with an A.
Yeah.
Killer Croc.
But I mean, Suicide Squad, there's some entertaining moments in that movie, but it was a pretty much a hot mess. So I'm completely fine. Even with Jared Leto's Joker that I mildly liked, some aspects of it I just feel like didn't work. They tried to do this like modern gangster iteration with all these tattoos, and I don't know. I think most people weren't really that fond of it. So I think he probably won't even be in the movie. And I wouldn't be surprised if Harley Quinn's even in the movie. She's got this like Birds of Prey movie that she's doing with a couple other DC characters. And I mean, even at the end of Suicide Squad, she got broken out of prison by the Joker. So why would she even be on the team again unless she got arrested again? So, I mean, are you even remotely excited for this Suicide Squad sequel?
Not really. No. And if you would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago before the first one came out, like, how excited are you for Suicide Squad 1 and 2? I'd be like jacked and ready to go. But man, that first movie really was a pretty big disappointment. I mean, it was a popcorn flick, but it was just kind of like a dud. It's like each time I watch it, I like it less. So I've at this point just stopped watching it.
Yeah, so have I. And I sort of use the phrase that Suicide Squad is like the Fast and Furious of comic book movies. It really sort of feels like that. And I mean, you even have David Ayer, who wrote the first Fast and the Furious movie, who directed Suicide Squad. So you have that aspect.
I would compare it to some of these later Fast and Furious movies, not the original Fast and Furious.
That's true. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next Fast and Furious movie, they go into like outer space or some shit. I would not be surprised, but there is Hobbs and Shaw, this like spin-off movie with The Rock and Jason Statham.
Oh, yeah.
I think that comes out maybe later this year. But that was directed by David Leitch, one of the co-directors of John Wick. And he went on to do like Atomic Blonde and Deadpool 2. So I am looking forward to that. I think they might avoid the sort of like outrageously over-the-top sort of dynamic that these most recent Fast and Furious movies, like they've sort of turned from like, we sort of just somehow like snowballed into talking about Fast and the Furious, which I don't necessarily mind, but that first one, it's a pretty basic, it's pretty much Point Break. I think you could easily call it a Point Break ripoff, but it went on from that to like these world-saving movies with these climactic events,
Transformers.
It's just ridiculous at this point. So I hope with Hobbs and Shaw, they sort of rein it back, give us a more straightforward story that's a little bit more realistic, but include some really awesome action set pieces in it. And with David Leitch, I think they're really going to deliver that.
Nice.
But that's it for our discussion on the Warner Brothers state of the DC universe, ever evolving DC universe. So we're excited. We got the Joker movie coming out later this year with Joaquin Phoenix, and I can speak for you, Adam. I know you'll be excited for that one to see.
As long as it doesn't turn into a Suicide Squad movie,
I know. I have faith.
I don't think we'll get that, though.
No, I have faith that Joaquin Phoenix signed on because, he was pitched. It's going to be a pretty character-driven piece, and it's not going to be it's not going to be a shit show, I hope. So we'll see. But let's get into Brendan Fraser's The Mummy.
And now our feature presentation.
Where did you get this?
On a dig down in Thebes.
Jonathan, I think you found something.
There is an ancient legend of a place known as the City of the Dead.
We call it the doorway to hell.
Where the earliest pharaohs were said to have hidden the wealth of Egypt.
Are we going into battle?
There's something out there. Something underneath that sand.
They came to uncover its secrets.
Mummies, my good son. This is where they made the mummies.
They sought to unlock its treasure.
And then there was light.
Oh, boy.
what they did
Oh my God, it does exist.
I think this may be the Book of the Dead.
was unleash a force unlike any the world has ever known.
You must not read from the book! You have unleashed the creature that we have feared for more than 3,000 years. He will regenerate and no longer be the undead.
We are in serious trouble.
This one!
If the occasion calls for it.
Trust me! It calls for it!
Universal Pictures invites you
His powers are growing.
This just keeps getting better and better.
to experience the adventure
It appears he's already chosen his human sacrifice.
that will live forever.
If he turns me into a mummy, you're the first one I'm coming after.
Go!
The Mummy.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, The Mummy, 1999, came out on May 4th on an $80 million budget. This one pulled in a gross of $155 million domestic, $415 worldwide. So probably one of the larger ones we've covered on the show. Eighth highest grossing film of that year. So if that says anything, I mean, you're talking some big ones out there. We're looking at like The Phantom Menace that came out 2 weeks after, The Matrix, The Sixth Sense.
A big box office year.
Yeah, huge. This one, though, Rotten Tomatoes has this one sitting at a 58% and audience score a little bit higher at 75. So kind of middle of the pack there as far as critic reviews. Directed by Steven Sommers. You guys know his other works like Van Helsing or G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra.
Yeah, some real notable flicks right there.
Get your Oscars out, man. Double fisting. But yeah, I think The Mummy, though, I mean, it's worth talking about. There's something to this movie that 20 years later there's still merit and discussion to be had. So what do you think, Rex? What are your kind of early memories and take on The Mummy?
I always loved this movie, and there's a certain charm about Brendan Fraser. And
yeah.
I remember the first thing I probably saw him in, I don't remember if it was either Encino Man first or George of the Jungle. It was one of the two. It was one of the two. So, yeah, the guy's just, he's a real charmer. Like, how can you not like Brendan Fraser? He's not like the funniest guy by any means, but he just seems like a really good dude. It's kind of a shame that he's not, I mean, if you look back at like the last 10 years or so, or even maybe like 13 or 14, the guy really wasn't in that much. You know, sort of the early 2000s, his career started to kind of taper off. He's getting into some more stuff lately, but I always loved The Mummy, and it's a great sort of like swashbuckling adventure movie. And you know, some of my gripes about the movie, you know, sort of revolve around like the special effects, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I always loved watching this movie, and I feel like it was always on TV, whether it was like TNT or FX or one of those networks. I feel like it would always be on, and I would love watching this movie.
Yeah, I think I probably saw Encino Man first, and I think with Brendan Fraser, I'd almost compare his early career to like I'd maybe compare him to Keanu Reeves, where Keanu Reeves started out with the Bill and Ted movies, these kind of silly teen kind of movies, and then doing something like a Point Break or Speed, and it kind of just changes the game for you as an actor. And I think this was the film maybe that kind of did that for Brendan Fraser.
Yep. As this this strong leading man that can lead this action franchise. But even looking back to Brendan Fraser's previous movies, this guy chose to do some really weird movies. Like you go from what was it, the early 90s? What was that movie he did? School Ties. He was in that in 1992. He was in Airheads with Adam Sandler and Steve Buscemi. Remember
Airheads
that?
Is great.
Yeah,
yes.
I love that movie. We'll have to do that one maybe sometime, depending on
so too.
if the people want it. But yeah, he went on to do George of the Jungle. Let's see, Blast from the Past. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah.
Let's see, The Mummy. Dudley Do Right, where he was this Canadian sort of ranger.
That was a reboot.
Bedazzled.
Yep, Bedazzled with Elizabeth Hurley.
Yes, and Monkey Bone. I remember you renting that one.
Monkey Bone. Yep, him and Chris Kattan, I think.
Yeah, and he had
not a good movie.
No, but I don't know if it was just these choices of movies that he decided to do or what, but it's just a lot of weird stuff, He never, aside from The Mummy, he never really got that breakout dramatic performance or anything like that. It was either these comedies or these over the top kind of action movies.
Right.
So
yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, he did a Looney Tunes Back in Action in 2003.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah, it's just kind of unfortunate. He was in that Journey to the Center of the Earth movie in 2008.
Oh, yeah.
There's a third Mummy movie in 2008. So the guy's done a ton of different stuff, but he just never had that one movie to sort of put him to an A-list level actor, I guess. He was never on par with other guys during that time period, like Brad Pitt, or I don't know who else was super popular in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I mean, probably Tom Cruise and Keanu, man. I mean, The Matrix came out that year.
Yeah.
I mean, he was pretty on top of his game as far as, that's right where you want to be. We mentioned The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis. At that point too, you're still looking at people even Harrison Ford and John Travolta. Those guys were still kind of putting out some of their action movies, just kind of wrapping up that era of some of those A-listers, still is kind of at the tail end of their good stuff.
Yeah, even Nick Cage back in 99. He was one of the most popular actors of that era. And I guess in the mid to late 90s, you had these actors who had been leading movies and franchises for the last 10 to 15 years who were still full front and center in these movies. So it's just, Brendan Fraser just never got his I guess, opportunity to sort of prove himself. And I don't know. He may not be the most skilled actor, but I would have liked to see him sort of stick around and do more stuff. It was kind of a bummer to see him kind of drift away in the early 2000s to, I don't know, 5 years ago or so. But he seems to be coming back around. But I guess let's sort of go back to 1999 and let's hear what Ebert has to say about The Mummy.
This Mummy is as loud and action-packed as the original 1932 Mummy with Boris Karloff was sinister and quiet and brooding. It plays like low-rent Indiana Jones, but has a lot of energy and the courage to go right to the wall with its lunatic story. I have a weakness for movies like this. I can't sit here with a straight face and tell you it's a great movie, but it brought back fond memories of Anaconda and Congo and movies like that you're almost ashamed to admit you like, but you did like it, and I like this one.
It's true, I did too. I mean, the bottom line is, yeah, it's fun. I mean, it isn't a very good movie in many respects. It's a popcorn movie. It's kind of obviously the son of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And there's a lot of quibbles I have with it. I mean, one thing that I have to say is that the Arab bashing in this movie is kind of unforgivable. You know, they're treated, they're smelly and they spit, and it's a kind of condescension and contempt that Hollywood would not dare with any other group.
Yeah, you know, I notice that in a lot of movies these days, that they and the Nazis are the only two villains that Hollywood seems comfortable with. Yeah. As far as the movie itself is concerned, it goes right back to all those other Pharaoh, Egypt, mummy, down into the tomb kinds of pictures, and I like that kind of stuff where the doors creak open and things come out of the dark.
The redeeming quality is it's totally silly, but it knows it's silly. You know, it is exactly what it is. And I think Brendan Fraser is very charming.
Yes, he is.
You know, and there's some nice chemistry between him and Rachel Weisz.
And really neat special effects involving those flesh-eating beetles that they bury the guy alive with. I like that.
Yeah, the scarabs are good.
Well, they seem to sort of, I guess. They seem to like it, I suppose. I mean, they had some criticisms, but
right.
I mean, I think they pretty much nailed it. It's definitely a silly sort of not really a swords and sandals movie, but a trip back to Egypt, and it's kind of like this movie takes you back to ancient Egypt for the first like 15 minutes, but then it goes to, what is it, the 1930s? Is that right?
Right.
Sort of setting the time period as far as like the first Indiana Jones movie. I think that takes place in the 30s. So it sort of has that kind of vibe about it.
I kind of look at it like it's like National Treasure meets Indiana Jones.
That is a good analogy.
Meets the Prince of Egypt, or Exodus, Gods and Kings, whichever one of those two you prefer. But yeah, it knows what it is. It's a big blockbuster popcorn flick, and it relies on action, history and intrigue of these like Egyptian mythology and all of that good stuff that is kind of really the meat of the movie. And then you've got a little love story in there and the charm of the actors and actresses, and the other thing that really is the glue is like the punchy one-liner comedy that really fills all the gaps throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And it does it very well too. I mean, it there's a reason they made now 4 of these movies, right?
Yeah, something like that. I think they sprinkle in the humor and just the sort of levity just the right amount. And sure, they could have gone for a more mature or thrilling type of movie, but I don't know. I guess with them having Brendan Fraser, I don't know if that would have been the route to go with that actor.
Right.
You know, I think they really played into Brendan Fraser's sort of personality, and a lot of the other sort of characters they surround him with have that kind of same dynamic and sort of sense of humor, whether it's, I don't remember is it Evie? Evie's brother, Jonathan?
Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that guy, he has a great sense of humor. And then, who's Ben? You have Benny. Which we'll get into a scene later about that. But yeah, there's all these other side characters that sort of surround Evie and Rick's characters, and it just really sort of puts them over and just really accentuates those sort of character traits, and I think it works great.
Yeah, and I think the plot works really well as far as like creating an opportunity to really get pretty deep into some not just some like Egyptian mythology and history, or I don't know if this is like straight out the history book, or if this is a lot of like screenwriting or whatever, but it dives deep. I mean, it dives even deeper than maybe even some of the Indiana Jones movies go. And I love that about it. Like, I love the idea of, what's it, Himnotep or whatever his name is, like the sin he commits at the beginning, and they set up the whole plot line of him being cursed and buried the way he was, and they give you that kind of like preface, or the prelude to the story we're going to see unfold before us, and you have that background, and then going into it, all of the history then means more, and it makes it relevant to our characters that we're seeing in the movie. And you have characters that care about the history, you've got characters that just care about treasure, and different levels of intelligence amongst all of the different people getting caught up in it, and all of the different dynamics that creates throughout the movie is really entertaining, because you have Evie who's very knowledgeable, and Rick who just is trying to like, let's get out of this alive, and then you've got all of the clumsy bumbling idiot American cowboys. Yes. You've got the guardians of Hymenoptera or whatever, the gigolo from Deuce Bigalow. He's in there. He's one of the guardians or whatever you want to call those guys, the Egyptians. There's just so many good elements and characters in this thing that they really did a great job of setting everything up where the plot unfolds just so smoothly, and it's easy to follow. It's not something where you're getting lost in the history and the relics and all of that stuff. Like, it's super, super smooth ride. Yeah.
Well, and even just the story on how it's basically a love story. I mean, you could argue how I guess whether this guy deserves the love or not, being this sort of I don't really know what Imhotep is. He like sort of, I forget that guy's role. Like what did he do in ancient Egypt? Was he like an advisor or like
I look at him like he's Jafar.
Oh,
and
okay.
He slept with Jasmine and then now he's in deep shit.
Yeah.
The Sultan found out and he said, okay, dude, you're going to get buried in a sarcophagus full of scarabs and you're going down forever. But, you that's a great point though. Like you almost want to like admire this guy because he is somehow able to find a way to be resurrected, and death is just the beginning, or death is not the end, or whatever the phrases they say multiple times in the movie. You want to like appreciate it a little bit, but he's just so damn evil that you want to see him go down. You want our good guys to win and survive and prevail. So too bad for him.
Yeah, it's just the way he's going about it.
Right.
He's not afraid of killing everybody and unleashing the 10 plagues on the world.
The plagues, And we don't need plagues.
Yeah, and I love sort of the ancient Egypt, and I wish more movies would sort of go back to that well. And I mean, in the years past, they've done that countless times, but I feel like it's been a sort of a genre that's been lacked in when it when they do it, it's not executed very well, whether it's like Gods of Egypt, which came out a couple years ago, or even Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings.
Right.
I thought that was kind of poor.
My favorite, of that story is The Prince of Egypt, the DreamWorks animated movie. I mean, it's pretty on the nose, like just tells it straight out, but the cast in that, for the voice acting in that movie and the music in it is all great. I mean, it's really, I like that one right up there with some of my favorite like Disney original classics.
Oh yeah.
It's an excellent movie. And, you see some of the stuff with the plagues in this one, but I'm glad they didn't give us like all 10. Like we didn't really need to see everything. I think they gave us, we got locusts and we got the water turning to blood, and there was an eclipse, and I think that's about all we saw. And that was enough. I mean, you just needed the flavor that he was dangerous enough that he was going to be bringing it. Someone that needed to be feared because he had these supernatural powers, and
Yeah. I think any more than what they actually showed us would have just been overkill and sort of
absolutely.
It would have been way too repetitive. So I think they did it just the right amount. So
yep, agreed.
But we've discussed world building, but I have a clip here lined up, and this is of the director Steven Sommers, and I believe it's like the visual effects supervisor, just discussing kind of coming up with the design of this iteration of the Mummy, sort of the look of this mummy. So let's take a listen.
The only Mummy film I was interested in, and the only one I'd ever seen, was the original with Boris Karloff. And it's funny because people started throwing other ideas at me as I was going on. They say, oh, do you have this in it? And do you have that in it? And I said, no, where does that come from? They go, the Mummy movies. And I was like, oh, I only watched the original. And in the original, Boris Karloff, he's only the mummy, a mummy for the first scene. And the rest of the movie, he's Boris Karloff with like kind of little wrinkles. And people are so used to guys wrapped in bandages, and that's what I wanted to get completely away from, because that wasn't at all the intent or the look of the original. And that's not at all our look.
He, from the very beginning, said, I don't want this to be like a mummy movie like we've seen in the past with the shuffling guy in bandages. This guy's got to be mean, he's got to be fast, and he's got to be dangerous. It's a movie for the 90s. And I said, okay, great, we can do that.
All right, so these guys really tried to stray away from the traditional look of mummies. I guess the overall sort of idea that people have in their minds is just the standard slow moving mummy wrapped up in tissue paper or whatever. So I guess it was kind of interesting seeing a different interpretation of it. And I mean, they really lean into sort of the visual effects, but even I guess it would be, what would those be? The Imhotep had was it his council or his what are his guys?
Oh man, I don't know, henchmen. I don't know.
Yeah, his buddies. They were all painted in like solid gold at the beginning of the movie. Yeah, they sort of used those characters in a visualistic kind of sense to sort of as a callback to the Boris Karloff movies. So you have Imhotep, who's this sort of new, wearing this like black sort of cloak with, once he comes back to life, he's sort of slowly, getting his skin back and his organs.
It's like Hellraiser.
It is. It's very much like Hellraiser. I actually am curious now. Were they really inspired by Hellraiser? Like
I know.
I'd be interested to find out if that's where they pulled that from. But yeah. I don't know if I'm completely on board with this look of the Mummy, especially after rewatching it and how much they lean into special effects. I don't know. Like there's some cool stuff they do with like the bug crawling up through his throat and then into his cheek and mouth, and then he like chews the scarab and eats it. I thought that was cool, but
yeah,
I don't know. There's a couple scenes where it's just like Imhotep he's able to walk around, but he's still like rotted flesh, and it just it looks pretty dated. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I've always thought, and especially back in the day. I mean, I know obviously this isn't the case, but Arnold Vosloo, if that's how you pronounce his name, the actor that plays Imhotep.
Yeah,
I always thought that he really resembled Billy Zane. Do you think so too?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when I was young, I might have even thought it was really Billy Zane.
I was totally thinking that last night. I was like, who is this actor who played Imhotep?
A bald, slightly maybe bulkier Billy Zane.
Yeah. Totally. I completely agree with you. But I mean, even just talking about his character of Imhotep, I think I would have preferred a little bit more sort of, I don't know. I just feel like he never really got a chance to sort of develop as a character himself.
Oh, totally agree. I totally agree with that.
There's the prelude at the beginning of the movie with, I don't remember what's her name. I don't even know if I can say it.
Anaxinamun?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the prelude with Imhotep and her, but he hardly even says anything.
Yeah.
As does she.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a little bit underdeveloped, and even once Imhotep returns after he's sort of resurrected by the Book of Death, he just doesn't have that much to do, and a lot of it's even just subtitled.
Right.
So
yeah, it's hard to get behind him as a character, and maybe that's intentional. Like, he is the villain, but I'm not one where I really think it's important to know your villain and to understand the villain's motives and everything. Like, certain cases it's fun to be in the dark about what the villain's motives are, but I feel like we know what he's driven by. So it's like, if you're going to give it to us, give it to us in a way where we can really grab onto it, not just like a taste. Like, all we got was a little taste in the beginning of, what that relationship was like. And I don't know. Unfortunately, I feel like Imhotep was shorted a little bit, and he got the short end of the stick as far as this script writing goes in this one. But it I don't know. You can't always have what you want. There's always little minor gripes that we'll find in these.
Definitely. But after the break, we're going to be getting into the dynamic between O'Connell and Benny, and whether or not this movie holds up with its CGI. So sit tight. We'll be right back. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/abominations and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audible.com/abominations and get started today.
Hey! O'Connell! It looks to me like I've got all the horses!
Hey, Benny! Looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the
river!
One of the great scenes in just sort of to showcase the relationship, the sort of rivalry that Benny and Rick have.
Yeah.
And it almost sort of acts as and lets us know that there's kind of a history with these characters. And sort of the opening scene with O'Connell and Benny, it's them sort of at Aminoptera, right? And
right. Yep.
They're sort of in this kind of battle with this kind of like army coming at them, and Benny obviously flees, and
right.
They sort of get separated, and then there's a 3-year gap, right, between that event and the quest that these characters are on now, and they somehow simultaneously at like the same point in time have their own team that's headed to this place. So it's kind of coincidental, but
it's a little convenient. That's okay.
But I just love the sort of relationship between these guys. There's always this kind of like rivalry, and Benny always tries to kind of like one up O'Connell, but then like he's such a complete idiot that O'Connell has such a smart response in kind of like way of making Benny feel like a fool, whether it's like throwing him off the boat or letting him know that you got the horses, but you're on the wrong side of the damn river.
Right. So it's a great dynamic. I mean, Benny is just such a weasel, man. I mean, in his performance, I feel like he's kind of off the hook because he is that character that's just there for that kind of comedic relief. So, he can be a little campy and still not take us out of it or ruin the movie, which I like that. And I think he did a good job of not going too over the top with the performance.
Yeah, he just interjects the humor in all the right places. And he's just like the village idiot. And, everybody can point and laugh at the guy. And he's great in this movie. And, he's that actor, Kevin J. O'Connor. He went on to play Igor in the Van Helsing movie. So he's kind of this great sort of like character actor. Like I never remembered the guy's name, but if I saw him, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's the guy who plays Benny from The Mummy or Igor from Van Helsing. So yeah, like this dynamic between Benny and O'Connor is just one of the great aspects about The Mummy, and one of the reasons why I think you can sort of go back to it and revisit it and have a great time.
One of my favorite scenes is when he's first face to face with Imhotep, and he's like walking towards him, and he's trying out like every single necklace or talisman or whatever you want to call it, the symbols on the religious symbols on his necklaces.
Yeah.
So he goes through like 3 or 4 religions and finally gets to like Judaism or whatever, and Imhotep's like, oh, the language of the slaves, and recognizes it, and that's kind of how he ends up being his little toady for the rest of the movie. But I love that scene. Like, it just goes to show that Benny has no loyalty to anyone. He'll basically like, he's basically just like such a weasel that he'd betray everyone, all of his fellow man, just to weasel his way out of perishing at his hand at that moment. So I think it's great. He's great. As his acting isn't the greatest, but he does have some great limelight in this movie. I appreciated it much more as an adult than I did as a kid. As a kid, I thought he was funny, but now I think I just kind of like really get a kick out of him in that relationship.
Yeah, and he goes out with a bang. He definitely has his spotlight where he goes out. So, yeah, I love that character. But let's transition into sort of the CGI in this movie, and that's kind of this director, Steven Sommers, he kind of leans into that with his movies. And I mean, it could be cool for the time, but you know, does it still allow the movie to sort of hold up?
I think it did better than I thought it was going to.
Okay.
There are some scenes, I think the ones that are standing out as being iffy or not holding up are the ones with the decayed bodies of the mummy and the things that are superimposed onto Imhotep's face and things like that, kind of getting that that Harvey Two-Face kind of look of having part of the face missing and the tendons of the jaw and everything kind of like stretched out there, like with the hole in the cheek kind of thing. That stuff, I think it just looks like it's just kind of laid over the top and pretty obviously CG, but I think the scarabs still look good. I really thought the scene in the desert when they're in the airplane and that sandstorm comes over and he opens his mouth and all of that, like that still is such a cool scene. It probably would look a lot better today, but it still is really awesome. It's just like such a cool shot, you know what I mean? Like I think they just did a very good job of that, like design wise. Like I just think it's a great idea brought to life. But yeah, there's stuff in there. There's just so much of it that it does look pretty dated at times.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you as far as the sort of decaying look of Imhotep after he's resurrected. I could have done without all that stuff. The scarabs look great, like you said, and I liked that scene in the desert. I thought that looked fine for being created in 1999. But
right.
I feel like the opening sequence where it showcases Egypt, it looks okay, but there's something about it where it just looks so artificial, and I don't know how they would have done it anywhere. I can't talk anyway else, but I don't know. It's just there's the use of it. I feel like it's not used in a way where it.
Yeah,
I feel like they didn't use it the right way. There's a little bit too much of it, I guess. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. And
well, in the ending when Imhotep gets kind of like, did they take his soul or so? Oh, they take his immortality. So
yeah, yep.
There was oh gosh, what kind of. Was it a carriage, like a horse and carriage, and they kind of like went through him and pulled it away? Or how did they take it from him?
Well, they used the other book. They found the gold book.
Well, yeah, but like what was projected? Like what was the
like the ghost or like spirit?
Yeah, like what
it was a horse
shape?
and carriage with
was it a horse and carriage?
Yeah,
I thought so.
Yep.
So that whole shot was probably one of the worst ones. I think that one I was like, what was that? Like that looked like Poltergeist, like late 70s, early 80s quality special effects. So that part of it I did think like, oh man, that wasn't nearly as good. And some of the stuff where he, even when he gets when they're doing kind of the transfer of the bodies or whatever, where that kind of like purple liquid kind of rises up as they're laying on the tables and all of that looks pretty bad too. But
yeah, anytime liquid is sort of made with CGI, it looks really artificial, especially if it's coming from like a movie in the 90s where this technology is sort of like new and people are really utilizing it, especially after like Terminator 2, that really sort of revolutionized CGI, and that came out in 1991 with the T-1000. But I don't know, just that liquid where it's sort of like the Anaxamun's like spirit that's coming out to sort of like overtake Evie's body. It just reminded me of that music video with Janet Jackson and Busta Rhymes. You know what I mean? Like anytime I see this like fake looking like liquid, that's all I think about is that music video.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if that one was if that was 1999 or not.
I have it pulled up. It's 1998.
Oh, okay. So maybe they took something from that. They would have been maybe shooting at the same time.
Yeah, probably.
Like, wow, look at these great special effects from this Busta Rhymes featuring Janet Jackson. Let's use that in this blockbuster film.
Right. Why not, right? Save a couple bucks.
But I mean, in its defense, it serves the purpose. It still gets it done. And I think regardless of how it looks in 2019, it is still creative enough and ambitious enough to be appreciated. And I think, we don't want to pick it apart too much to the point where, we do like this movie. Like it's a great ride. Like, and there's people out there that are, and maybe they're younger people that didn't have the opportunity to enjoy Indiana Jones films. But you mentioned at the end of last week's episode in introducing this one for this week that there are people out there that, consider The Mummy to be their Indiana Jones. I mean, what do you make of that?
I think I understand why, but it's like at the same time, go watch Raiders of the Lost Ark and you will be revolutionized. You know what I mean? Like, I guess they sort of have the same aspects, whether it's like action adventure, a period piece, ancient artifacts, and all of that sort of stuff, and sort of a scruffy, tan leading man. They have those similarities, but I just view Raiders of the Lost Ark or even the other two Indiana Jones movies as just far superior. And Raiders of the Lost Ark is, to me, I consider that like one of Spielberg's like best movies of all time. And
right,
yeah.
Well, the concept of like history teacher, is he a college professor? I think maybe something like that. Who on the weekend goes off to, Egypt to get into these adventures and go through what he does with the, the compliments of John Williams doing the score and just the sheer like epic adventure of it all and the character himself, like. Indiana Jones is iconic. Rick O'Connell, I'm not so sure. No. I like Jerry Goldsmith's score for The Mummy.
Yeah, I did too.
And it almost kind of reminds me of like a Howard Shore, like that was Lord of the Rings, right? Is that Howard Shore?
Yeah, yep.
So it just has that really like brassy, epic vibe to it.
Yeah, definitely.
But Indiana Jones and what they did with that, it's just so iconic and so like memorable, and you could do it over and over and over and it would always feel like great. It just is the kind of movie that's just like resonates with the human soul. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it's on another level, and The Mummy taps into it. It draws from it, and it kind of tries to repeat some of the magic, but it does some things differently, and it does some things not quite as well. So for me, I'm with you. I'm sticking with, Raiders being, I kind of like them in the order that they came out. I like Raiders, then Temple, and then Last Crusade. And then I don't even acknowledge the one that shall not be named.
Yeah.
But shout out to Shia LaBeouf. Good job, bud. But I don't know. I mean, I think The Mummy is, like I said earlier, it's National Treasure meets Indiana Jones meets The Prince of Egypt. And those are all three movies that I like. And there's something about this one that it's got its place. It's just, it's not on the list above Indiana Jones. It's below.
Yeah. And I mean, if I'm watching The Mummy, I'm not nearly as locked in as I am when I have Raiders of the Lost Ark on. I mean, if I'm watching The Mummy, I'm sort of like somewhat tuned out, or I might be on my phone a little bit or talking to somebody in the room. And, I'm sort of watching them for different reasons. If I'm watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, I want to be sort of immersed in this incredible adventure with one of the greatest action adventure heroes of all time. And if I have The Mummy turned on, I'm kind of just wanting to watch adventure comedy with Rick O'Connell trying to save the world from this mummy who's on this terror of love, I guess. I don't know what the hell he was doing, but I don't know. I feel like they're sort of apples and oranges a little bit, but they're so similar in the way they're kind of created, the sort of essence of what makes these core characters, that it's hard to not compare them. Right. And I know there's a lot of young sort of movie fans out there that probably haven't watched maybe either of these. And especially Indiana Jones. I don't know, maybe your dad or, your uncle or your aunt or your mom has shown you Indiana Jones. I would hope they would have at this point. But I'm sure there's some people that haven't seen that movie, and possibly The Mummy. Things sort of get lost in the sands of time. But both of these movies are on Netflix right now. So now is the time, if you don't want to pay to buy the Blu-ray or rent it. If you have a Netflix account, watch these movies and, soak up the flavor, and let us know which one you preferred. If you've never seen these movies, I'd be curious to know your thoughts. And even if you have seen these movies countless times, let us know your thoughts and opinions, whether it's on our Twitter or Facebook. Hit us up.
One thing I'll say to defend The Mummy, just to look at it from a different perspective, is that I would say Rachel Weisz and the character of Evelyn is definitely stronger and more intriguing and more entertaining than any of the female leads in any of the Indiana Jones films. And I would also say, related, the side characters in The Mummy are really entertaining and funny, and add a lot of I don't know, just a lot of entertainment value on a different level, or just kind of, I don't know, they're more colorful characters than some of the Indiana Jones ones. Some of them have more identity, I'll say. Like, I really enjoy Jonathan. Jonathan's great. Benny's great. How about rest in peace, Captain Winston Havelock?
Yes.
What'd you make of Winston and his quick demise?
I thought that character was great, and I forgot that his character died in that movie.
Yeah.
After the sort of sandstorm brought upon them by Imhotep.
Oh man, and it's a shame too, because he mentioned to him like, we will I don't remember how exactly he phrased it to Winston, but he told him like, we're going on a mission and we shall surely perish, or we probably won't return, or something like that. And he's like, really? And he was like, Captain Winston Havelock at your service. Something like that. I might be off on that, but what a great character and performance by Bernard Fox. Great character. I really enjoyed that one, just kind of like sprinkled in there. And you got to do that with these types of movies. Like, we got to have something that kind of like gives us a little bit of taste of this. He was a more international type of character, probably British or something like that, but I loved it.
The Mummy has just a great sort of ensemble of wacky and colorful characters, like you said. And one of my personal favorites is Warden God Hassan. He's the warden of the prison where O'Connell's being held up at before Evelyn and Jonathan come and get him out. So
I thought his name was Abismal from Aladdin.
Oh, I don't remember.
Did you get an Abismal vibe from him?
Which guy was that?
Abismal in Aladdin.
Yeah.
He was played by Jason Alexander. Never mind. He's just kind of another Weasley kind of, I don't know. Weasley kind of treasure hungry kind of character.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember.
The second Aladdin movie, he ends up being the puppet of Jafar, kind of doing whatever he needs him to do. Kind of the role that Benny plays in this movie. But anyways, tangent.
I could tell you zero information about the Aladdin sequel. So that's how much I remember about that.
That's probably a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, but anyway, I think we've covered this movie quite in depth, and make sure to let us know what you guys think of this movie. Whether you think The Mummy is better than Raiders of the Lost Ark, or if you just enjoy this movie, you throw it on the TV every now and again. Let us know on Facebook or Twitter. But
I also want to give a quick shout out to the most electrifying man in sports entertainment who made his appearance in The Mummy 2, which we may or may not get to eventually, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And we can't mention this franchise without thanking The Rock for his performance in The Mummy 2.
I'm sure he...
the people's champion.
I'm sure he loses sleep over whenever that sequence, or whenever somebody mentions that scene from that movie.
The Scorpion King himself.
Yes. One of the worst, I guess, visual effects that have ever been incorporated into a motion picture.
Love it.
Yeah. So, but Adam, what do we got next week?
Next week, we are going to travel back 2 more years to 1997 and thoroughly enjoy ourselves a little bit of Starship Troopers.
Yeah, so I put a poll up on our Twitter, and I asked which movie they would like us to do next, and I had Gone in 60 Seconds, Starship Troopers, Total Recall, and RoboCop, and it was chosen, Starship Troopers. But I think after that I think, Adam, you brought this one up. I think after Starship Troopers, we'll dive into Gone in 60 Seconds. So
nice.
I think we can put that one on the schedule. But next week we'll be back with Starship Troopers, and make sure to let us know your thoughts. We'd like to bring our boy Arthur back onto the show. You can send any email or suggestion of what you'd like us to cover about that movie. Just email us at abominationspod@gmail.com. Or you can call into the show at 616-594-0764 and leave us your thoughts. Let us know what you think about Starship Troopers. But for Adam and myself, we'll see you next week.